According to a very recent study, testosterone levels for American males age 15 to 39 have dropped on average 25% over the past 15 years. And listen to this. The average 75-year-old male living in Okinawa, Japan, has much higher levels of testosterone than the average American male who is 45 years old. Much higher levels despite the fact that they are 30 years older. The average man in their 20s right now in America has the same testosterone levels as a man in their 60s did only 15 to 25 years ago. You don't need to be a health expert to realize this is a huge problem. And sadly, it's getting worse every single year with a drop of close to 1% annually in testosterone levels on average. This has led to a dramatic increase in synthetic prescription testosterone injections and gels, otherwise known as TRT, or testosterone replacement therapy, with TRT clinics popping up literally everywhere to take advantage of all of the men seeking a quick synthetic fix to a long-term lifestyle problem. Here's the great news in all of that. For those that are ready to take action, this is a very fixable problem. Welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast, where we provide education and inspiration to help guide you on your journey to look better, feel better, and most importantly, heal better. Hello, and welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Kevin Schultz, and today we are going to talk about low testosterone and the top 10 ways to raise it naturally, as well as testosterone replacement therapy and what to be aware of with the dangers and the side effects of TRT, as well as how to properly, that is key, properly test for low testosterone, and then the potential benefits of things like peptide therapy instead of TRT. The intent of the podcast today is to arm my male listeners with the knowledge and action steps so you can make the right decision for yourself on whether you want to properly test T levels, and from there, if your testosterone is low, whether you want to explore natural or synthetic methods for raising it. Be sure to stick around to the end, where I'll give you my opinion and some things to consider so you can make the best decision for you. Okay, so let's start with the basics, as I often like to do. What is testosterone? In a nutshell, testosterone is known as a sex hormone, and specifically, it is known as the sex hormone for defining masculinity in males. Adequate levels are needed for things like libido, which most people are very aware of, that is a huge part of testosterone. So not only libido, but also testosterone leads to better arousal as well as satisfaction for men. It's also important and needed for normal sleep patterns, healthy bone density, the ability to grow and maintain muscle, proper energy levels, as well as the production of red blood cells and more. So that's some pretty important stuff. And most of that is not really talked about when we talk about testosterone. It's ultimately what I found when I was reviewing podcasts and listening to podcasts and doing all my research for this podcast. I found that often was completely overlooked. The focus was on libido and muscle, and that's kind of where it started and where it stopped with most of the information that I came across. So keep in mind, this discussion is much more than growing big muscles and libido. Studies show that low testosterone lowers your quality of life as well as your length of life. And it doesn't get much more important than both of those, in my opinion. So certainly as we age, we know that testosterone naturally declines, as many things do when we age. So there is a natural decline, but what we're currently seeing in the trends in American men especially is not a natural decline with aging. And sadly, that is how it is often portrayed, and it's becoming normalized because it is becoming so common. Not normal. So there's a big difference between common and normal. But many men are going to their medical doctors, having it tested, and like, well, we see these levels all the time where they should be at 600, 700, 800 or higher, and their levels are maybe 400, and they're told, hey, don't worry about that. We see this in the majority of men your age, and these are men who are in their 40s who should be 800 plus with their testosterone levels. We are seeing just a rapid decline, not only in men, but also in teenagers. So even before boys are done growing, they're already starting to see this decline in testosterone. So you have to ask the question, what is causing all of this? And ultimately, it comes down to a few different things. So number one, there's a massive nutrient deficiency. So ultimately, people are malnourished and overfed. And a lot of times when I talk about being malnourished and overfed, it seems contradictory. And, the question then becomes, well, how can you be overfed but malnourished? And that's really a simple answer. So overfed means you're eating too many calories. And that is because so many of the processed, ultra-processed foods are very calorie rich, calorie dense, but they lack nutrients. And even if they have nutrients listed on the label, they're not absorbable nutrients. They're not things that your body can properly utilize. And that is what leads to these nutrient deficiencies, which not only lead to low T levels, but lead to so many other health problems as well. So that is one of the causes. And then you also have, which is related, an unhealthy gut. And an unhealthy gut comes from processed foods, as I mentioned, but then also things like prescription drugs lead to a very unhealthy gut. Chlorinated water. What is chlorine designed to do? It's designed to kill things, right? To kill bacteria. That's why we put it in a hot tub or in a swimming pool. Well, what do you think happens when you put it into your drinking water and then you consume it? It kills the good bacteria in your gut. Alcohol is also responsible for killing good bacteria in your gut. That unhealthy gut also leads to a decline and an abnormal decline in testosterone levels. Low D3 levels have also been directly linked to testosterone levels, and not just low D3 levels, but people that have low D3 levels specifically because they are getting a lack of sunlight. So you can raise D3 levels with supplements, and I'm a big fan of doing that when it's needed. But specifically, it is the lack of proper sunlight and what you get from sunlight that is leading to this decline in D3 levels. And then there's also being overweight. We know that there's a direct correlation between increased body fat percentage. So the higher the body fat percentage goes, the lower your testosterone level goes. Lack of exercise and movement in general is another leading cause, because lack of exercise and movement in general leads to decreased musculature. Decreased musculature leads to decreased testosterone. The more you decrease testosterone, the harder it is to increase musculature. So it's this awful snowball effect that takes place from the lack of exercise and movement in general. And then prescription drugs, I already mentioned that once, but prescription drugs specifically like statins. If you haven't listened to my statin podcast, can't recommend that one enough. But prescription drugs like statins are not maybe linked, they are directly linked to low testosterone. So if you are one of those people that feel like you're doing so many good things, you're kind of nailing it, you're going to the gym, you're doing all these healthy things, but your testosterone levels just stay low and your medical doctor has you on statins, that would be the place that you would want to start looking at, and start with listening to that podcast, arming yourself with some knowledge so you can make the proper decision with your medical doctor on whether or not that statin is right for you. So what can you do about all of that? So let's talk about how to raise T levels naturally. And I'm not just talking about a little raise here. So a lot of times when we talk about natural, yes, as I mentioned in the past, it takes longer. It's certainly not the quick fix, but we're not talking about how to raise them naturally with just this little bit of a boost. If you incorporate the things that I talk about today, if you incorporate all of them and you do it for a period of time, You need at least 60 days, but then ideally longer, where it becomes your norm, your lifestyle. We're talking about the ability to double, triple, even quadruple your testosterone levels. Very, very doable, and people do it all the time. Before we dive into those top 10 ways to naturally raise it, just check this out for a second. Here is what the VA, so Government Department of Veteran Affairs, has to say about how to raise your testosterone naturally. Keep in mind, what I'm about to say is not my recommendation, polar opposite, in fact, but this is what the VA tells people. Avoid red meat and increase your consumption of soy products. And as you'll see as I'm going through this podcast, this is literally the opposite of what the research actually shows. They're literally telling people to do the polar opposite of what any legitimate research actually shows you should be doing. So, moral of the story, do not listen to mainstream media and the government when it comes to anything health related, although hopefully this will continue to improve, and we have seen improvements with the MAHA movement, which I'm obviously a huge fan of anything we can do to make America healthy again. But don't follow government guidelines at this point. Do not follow mainstream media for your health-related advice, or you might not only get bad advice, but the polar opposite of what you should be doing. That is, it should be labeled as, here's how you can tank your testosterone levels, not raise them. Okay, so diving into that top 10. These are not necessarily in particular order at all, but number one is incorporating testosterone boosting foods, things like healthy fats. Most men with low testosterone consume too much junk food, like considerably way too much junk food, that highly processed food that we've already talked about, and then too many carbohydrates. And then you have to get rid of those empty calories if you want to make a change, that those processed carbohydrates, those processed foods, you have to get rid of those empty calories and then eat more healthy fat if you want to see a change happening. There was a study published in the Journal of Steroid Biochemistry that looked at the effects of diet on sex hormones in healthy men, specifically testosterone. And the results showed that when men decreased their healthy fat intake, it resulted in lower testosterone. So that's the opposite of what we want to do. So this study focused on people decreasing their healthy fat intake, and that directly resulted in lower testosterone, overall total testosterone, as well as something called free testosterone. Both of those hugely important when we're talking about testing testosterone and looking at the full picture. Some of the best healthy fats that you can focus on that will boost testosterone include things like organic virgin coconut oil, fermented dairy from things like A2 casein, kefir, and yogurts. I'm a huge fan, and I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Alexandre products. I see it spelled all the time because my family buys these, and I see their website, which we'll have linked in the show notes, but not sure if it's Alexander or Alexandre products. But they have amazing, amazing products. They literally check all 5 of the boxes of what I tell people to look for when they're looking for dairy, which is full fat, plain, organic, A2 casein, and 100% grass-fed. That is all you want to look for when you're looking at dairy, and there's not too many companies out there at all. And they are, in my opinion, the best. So that is a great way to source your dairy. And then high quality EPA, DHA fish oil and fish is also huge there. Flax seeds and chia seeds, things like avocados, and a wide variety of nuts and seeds. And then if we shift from high fats or high quality fats into high quality proteins, if you want to raise and maintain healthy testosterone levels, you absolutely need to consume high quality protein. Many studies show that a lack of protein affects your body's ability to produce testosterone properly. So another very overlooked benefit of protein is that it helps you feel full faster, And it prevents overeating, which is one of the many reasons that you've probably heard me talk about in the past. I highly recommend building your meals around protein and focusing on getting at least 30 to 50 grams per meal. Ideally, shooting for a range somewhere in that 0.75 grams to 1.25 grams per pound of your ideal body weight. And a little side note there, because I get this question all the time. Ideal body weight, you don't have to be like hypercritical about this. It's really what you would think of your ideal body weight. If you're 400 pounds, you're like, ideally, I think I should probably be in the 200 pound range with my frame. Okay, great. Then that's your ideal body weight. You don't have to look at a chart. You don't have to go to a medical doctor to figure this out. It's just approximate ideal body weight. And then you also do not have to be hypercritical about, am I getting exactly 0.75 grams per meal, if that's what I want to shoot for? Or am I getting exactly a gram per pound of ideal body weight? You don't have to be hypercritical about that. They're somewhere in that range. And if you miss a day and you're a little higher the next day, not a big deal. You just want to, as a whole, overall, shoot for that range of 0.75 grams to 1.25 grams per pound of ideal body weight. So if I simplify that, I'm around 155 pounds, and so I would want to shoot for around 150 grams of protein on a daily basis. So if I'm eating 3 meals, I'm shooting for 50 grams of protein per meal. So you want to get great, high-quality protein, and examples of that would be 100% grass-fed beef, not just grass-fed. That's one of the biggest misleading things on a label. Grass-fed means it was fed grass at some point during that animal's life. 100% grass-fed means exactly that. They're 100% grass-fed. They're not cheating at the end and fattening them up with 3 months of corn before they send them to slaughter. Wild-caught Alaskan sockeye salmon, also hugely important when we're talking about fat as well as high quality protein, and then things like pastured eggs as well, ideally seeking those from a local farm that you trust and know that they are doing the right things, and those chickens are actually out to pasture when they can be. Okay, talking about carbohydrates. I just released a podcast recently on carbohydrates specifically and how to make carbohydrates healthy again. So be sure to check that out for a deeper dive on this topic. But what you want to focus on here for carbohydrates when we're talking about raising testosterone levels naturally is complex carbohydrates. They're so important for optimizing testosterone levels, and they will help with maintaining energy and mood as well. So a little side bonus there. And this is true for everyone, but especially true for athletes or men who lift weights when we're talking about getting the proper amount of complex carbohydrates and then how that affects your energy levels as well as your mood. Some of the best complex carbohydrates out there, in my opinion, and according to research, are things like steel-cut oats. You want to do cooked or overnight oats. That'll make more sense after you listen to that carbohydrate podcast, but it has to do with how your body breaks those down in the digestive system. Things like quinoa, wild brown rice, sweet potatoes, one of my absolute favorites, and then a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. And in my very strong opinion, that is where the majority of your complex carbohydrates should come from, is that wide variety of fruits and vegetables. Nutridyne is my number one choice for the vast majority of my family supplements. I'm a huge fan of nearly everyone taking what I call the foundational 4 supplements: a multivitamin, a spore-based probiotic, omega-3 fish oil, and vitamin D3 with K2. The large majority of people are deficient in many of these nutrients, and they are the building blocks to gut health, immune system strength, brain health, heart health, and every other aspect of your health. Don't fall into the trap of chasing symptoms with supplements, and instead start to rebuild your health with the foundational 4. We partnered with Nutridyne so that you can save 15% on every order, and not just with the foundational 4, but all of your other supplements as well. Go to foundationalhealth365.com, click on Shop Brands, and then Nutridyne, set up your account, and you're all set to automatically get 15% off all orders. Now let's get back to the Foundational Health Podcast. Moving on to number 2 on this list, supplementation. So when it comes to nutrients, you will never, ever beat a high quality whole food nutrition plan and diet. But if you want to hedge your bet and make sure that you're not missing out on some important micronutrients that are so important for proper testosterone levels, Nutridyne has a great supplement called Testosterone Balance, and you can get that for 15% off on our website. Essential amino acids are also huge when it comes to healthy testosterone levels, and this can be a very important way for people to make up for maybe a lack of protein in their diet. So, for example, if you are only getting 30 grams of protein per meal and you find it very difficult to get up to that 50 range where you ideally should be, this is where amino acids can come in. You can check out my podcast that I did on protein for more info on that. But Nutridyne has, I'm probably a little bit too excited about this for a supplement. I don't remember ever being as excited as I am, but Nutridyne has come up with this new amazing supplement called Core Aminos that I am a huge, huge fan of. It's in a berry lemonade flavor, and I personally think it tastes absolutely fantastic. So I start every single day with that. That's one of the first things I do when I wake up is I get those amino acids, which doesn't break my fast, but it allows my body to then use those essential amino acids as the building blocks for proteins to get the proper protein in, to boost testosterone levels, and so much more. So in addition to those, you always want to start with the foundational 4 supplements to make sure that you have all of the building blocks necessary, not only for testosterone, but overall health as well. And as a reminder, those are multivitamin, spore-based probiotic, EPA, DHA, omega-3 fish oil, and vitamin D3 with K2. The third recommendation for boosting testosterone is foods to remove and avoid. So we've talked about supplements to add, we've talked about foods to add. Now let's talk about what you should remove and avoid if possible at all costs. Number 1 would be sugar. Kicking your sugar addiction and then removing the processed foods that contain sugar is very likely, not just in my opinion, but according to a ton of research, the number 1 thing that you can remove from your diet, according to, again, multiple studies to help raise and maintain healthy testosterone levels. We know that type 2 diabetes, for example, when you have a type 2 diabetic, that person is twice as likely to have significantly low testosterone levels, significantly. So here's how that works. When you eat too much sugar, your blood sugar levels become elevated, and not just once in a while, not just right after a meal, but when you're a type 2 diabetic, those blood sugar levels become elevated all of the time. So they just simply do not come down. They don't lower. And then your body, of course, tries, as it always does, it tries to balance things. It tries to make you healthier. So your body tries to lower your blood sugar levels. It does this by producing extra insulin in your pancreas. That insulin is then released into the bloodstream to remove the sugar from your blood so you don't die. And as a result of your cells being constantly exposed and bombarded with insulin, you develop insulin resistance, and this is what leads to having type 2 diabetes and getting that dreaded diagnosis. Once you have type 2 diabetes, your body simply can't produce testosterone properly. So they're not trying to figure out why do type 2 diabetics have significantly lower levels of testosterone. It is a very well-known, well-studied, well-documented thing. Once you get to type 2 diabetes, you just simply can't produce testosterone. Simple as that. And you don't need to fall into the trap of thinking that this isn't your problem. So I can't recommend this enough because I hear this all the time when I have this discussion with people that, well, that's not my problem. I'm not a diabetic. But if you listen to my diabetes podcast, you'll learn that, and it's on reversing diabetes, but by the way, that's very, very possible to do. And you'll learn, sadly, that the majority of Americans, males and females, are either already diabetic or pre-diabetic without even knowing that they're there. So if you are serious about getting healthy and serious about raising testosterone levels, you need to admit you have a sugar addiction, if you do, and kick the habit. And there is no better way to do that than following our 60-day reversing diabetes protocol, if that is your issue. Refined grains, another thing you want to avoid at all costs. And basically, these are the same as sugars. They have very low nutritional value, just completely nutritionally void at times. And they do the same things in your body as sugar and lead to high blood sugar, insulin resistance, and low T levels as a result. So really, I always recommend looking at processed carbohydrates, these low quality carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates. They are just sugar. So don't look at them any differently, because that is really how your body sees it. And the most common examples are things like processed breads and processed tortillas and processed bagels, flours and crackers and quick oats and pastas and white rices. I could go on and on because there are a ton of them, but those are some of the big ones. Alcohol is another huge killer of testosterone levels. And if you're serious about raising testosterone levels, you definitely want to eliminate or limit your alcohol consumption for sure. Number 4, intermittent fasting. Also just recently did a podcast on this, and this is definitely one where you're going to want to incorporate if you haven't yet. So please go back, listen to that podcast on fasting, all of its benefits. And when it comes to fasting, which of course is going a period of time without food, most people would think this would hurt your testosterone levels, but I promise you it is quite the opposite actually. So there are studies that show when men intermittent fast and they do that consistently, it will boost testosterone levels anywhere between 200 to 400%. That's a really, really big deal. And you can see those boosts in a pretty short period of time, but of course you can't maintain those if you just intermittent fast for a week and then you never do it again. It's not like your testosterone levels are going to stay up. Intermittent fasting is fantastic for males to do on a regular and consistent basis, and in my opinion, for life. And then that is when you're going to see the benefits of those increased testosterone levels anywhere from 200 to 400%. Of course, the 400%, you've got a better odds of hitting that when you're incorporating many of these other things that I'm talking about today. In addition, when you eliminate all foods for 24 hours, so you're going beyond just an intermittent fast, but you're doing a 24-hour fast, a study from the University of Virginia Medical School recently showed that you increase something called HGH, human growth hormone, by 2,000%. That is massive, a 2,000% increase in HGH. And guess what? One of the many amazing benefits are to increases in HGH. That's right. Increased HGH means increased testosterone. Number 5 on the list, weight training and something known as high intensity interval training. So hopefully I don't have to convince anyone that lifting weights is good for testosterone. That's pretty well documented. There's thousands of studies that are proving this to be true. But here are some simple tips and hopefully a few things that will help you understand the importance of both weight training as well as high intensity interval training. So if you really want to increase muscle gains, muscle strength, overall health, dropping body fat, boosting testosterone, you'll definitely want to combine the two. So you want to combine lifting with interval training workouts. So a good simple combo, and this is research based, is lift 3 days a week. So 3 days per week, and you're trying to lift in that 6 to 12 rep range. You want to make your reps count. Don't count your reps, meaning that you're not just going through the motions. You're actually making every single rep count. And 6, when you get there, should be hard. Doesn't have to be a complete failure, but 6 should be hard and you're starting to fail. Or 12 should be hard. Wherever you're at, wherever you finish, make those reps count, every single one of those, and don't just stop at 12. If you chose the wrong weight and you can do 15, 16, 17 reps before it gets hard, then absolutely keep going. There's still tremendous benefit to that. So you want to do that, and then you want to hit all of the large muscle groups of your body one time per week. Certainly you hit the smaller muscle groups as well, ideally, but it's hitting those larger muscle groups, the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the biceps, the pecs, the back, all of those muscle groups, and the exercises that hit those are the ones that are going to have the biggest mover in testosterone levels. And then when it comes to high intensity interval training, you want to incorporate this 1 to 2 times per week to boost your HGH and your T levels. And studies show after an effective high intensity interval workout, your body will burn fat up to 36 hours. That is massive. So for the most part, when it comes to interval training workouts, you can't screw it up. And I mentioned this so many times in the past, and I continue to mention it because I get the question, I get Facebook messages, which I love, by the way. So I'm not saying don't send me these. I love getting those messages, but I get the messages all of the time of what should I do? I see Tabata workouts. I see this workout where I'm supposed to go for 60 seconds or 20 seconds. For the most part, you can't screw it up. There's so much good research on all of those. So as long as you're giving it close to max effort for a 20 to 60 second period of time, whatever type of workout you choose, followed by a short 20-second to 3-4 minute low or no impact recovery time, and then repeating this for 3 to 10 sets, depending again on the type of workout that you choose, you can't screw it up. You're going to see all of those results that we've talked about. And you can find endless examples of HIIT style workouts, as they're called, on YouTube. You just find ones that work best for you, that you're actually going to stick with, and ideally mix it up instead of sticking with the same one over and over again. Just in case you need a little more convincing, in addition to increasing your testosterone and HGH levels, high intensity interval training can help burn fat, not only just for 36 hours, but 3 to 9 times more fat than regular cardio. It can also lower your resting heart rate. That's a great thing. Lower your blood pressure. Keep your brain young by increasing circulation, and it helps to detoxify your body by stimulating your lymphatic system, which is so amazing at detoxification. Number 6, I already mentioned this, so we're going to cover this briefly, but that is get some sun. Studies show adequate levels of vitamin D3 in your body will help naturally increase testosterone levels, and the exposure of the skin to what are called ultraviolet B radiation. So you have UVA, UVB. UVA is responsible for actually tanning and changing the color of your skin. UVB is what's responsible and is the major source of what drives vitamin D to be produced in your body. And only a small proportion of that vitamin D3 is derived from dietary intake. So the biggest driver here is absolutely getting in the sun. So ideally you want to get out in the sun 20 to 30 minutes each day during midday sun with as much skin exposed as possible to increase your D3 levels. And then for those of you who can't or just aren't doing that, or during the winter months, if you live in a place like Wisconsin, like I do, this is where whole food nutrition and supplementation become absolutely critical. They're never, ever going to be as good as getting in the sun and letting your body produce it naturally, but they become critical when you're unable to do that. So you can at least get those D3 levels up, not only for testosterone health, but brain health and whole body health as well. Number 7, raise testosterone while you sleep. Did you know you have a circadian clock in every single cell in your body? I just find that fascinating. It doesn't matter how many times I read it, how many times I talk about it. I find it absolutely fascinating that every single cell in our body has a circadian clock built into it. And your body's circadian clock essentially resets every single night and releases chemicals like cortisol, which contribute to the overall hormone balance. Cortisol isn't always bad. You need some of it. So it contributes to that overall hormone balance that can prevent low testosterone levels. So you want to focus on a bare minimum of 7 hours of sleep and up to 9, but not less and not more, according to a wide body of research. Both too little as well as too much can be highly detrimental. Ideally, you're going to bed between somewhere, well, I shouldn't say between, but somewhere around 10 p.m. So obviously there's a window there, but somewhere around 10 p.m. and you're waking up somewhere around 6 a.m. for optimal hormone balance. And you want to do that consistently also for optimal hormone balance. So just follow what we call at Foundational Health, the 10-3-2-1-0 rule. 10 hours before bedtime, stop caffeine. I don't care if you're the type of person that says caffeine doesn't affect my sleep. It does, whether you feel it or not, and that's proven in countless sleep studies. So the 10, stop caffeine 10 hours before you go to bed. 3 hours before going to bed, stop food and alcohol intake. 2 hours, stop work, stop anything stressful, don't have stressful conversations. And then ideally, this is where you want to stop or at least dramatically slow down water intake. I don't talk about that a lot, but that is really key as well for good quality sleep. And then 1 hour before bedtime is where you eliminate TV, cell phone use because of blue lights primarily. And then that artificial blue light from light bulbs also, of course, has a dramatic effect. Pretty easy fix there. Go on Amazon, go on our website, and you can find orange or red light bulbs. And both of those are great at not only providing you with good light, but also eliminating blue light. So you can have that orange light on, you can have that red light on, you can still see everything, but it calms your brain, it calms your mood, it sets you up for better sleep, where blue light does the polar opposite. It is designed to wake you up, to stimulate your brain. And even if you fall asleep, studies show when you're exposed to that blue light and then you fall asleep, you don't hit the deep stages of sleep. So that's really what all of this is about. You can still fall asleep, but you don't hit those deep stages of healing, restful sleep when you're not incorporating these things. And then the 0 is do not hit the snooze button. Number 8, hydrate properly. Hydration, it's such a huge role. So it plays a role in every single aspect of your health, and healthy hormone and testosterone levels are no exception to that. So if you're serious about raising testosterone, you need to get serious about proper hydration on a daily basis. Drink half of your ideal body weight in ounces of water daily. You want to sip and not gulp. Add things like electrolytes. Choose a really good high quality one. My preference is Element. There's a lot of other ones that are really good out there without all of the added artificial chemicals and sweeteners and flavorings. So make sure you're looking for that. Eliminate things like chlorine. We already talked about why you want to eliminate that, but that becomes really important. And then you also want to eliminate other chemicals by filtering those. So those toxins will build up in your system, and there are a lot of them in tap water, and those toxins will build up and they just crush proper hormone levels. My favorite company is Sentry Water Filtration, because it not only removes the big ones like chlorine, but all kinds of other things, including pharmaceuticals and lots of microplastics and other things that are now found, sadly, in our water supply, those forever chemicals. And most filters just simply don't remove those things. They're removing the big things like chlorine, but not the smaller toxins. And then, as I mentioned, you want to stop water consumption 1.5 to 2 hours before bed, or if you're going to still consume, you want to sip small amounts. Number 9, raise testosterone by lowering body fat. I mentioned earlier there's a direct correlation here, and it's a direct inverse relationship between higher body fat and lower testosterone. So the cool thing is that every single thing we talked about today will lower your body fat percentage if you incorporate it and you stick with it over time. The biggest movers, though, are cutting out sugar and refined grains while increasing things like weightlifting and high-intensity interval training. Number 10, educate yourself and have the right mindset. Your body is absolutely capable of healing, and it is capable of raising testosterone naturally, but you need to be patient and give it time. It's called the healing process, not the healing event, because it takes time when you do it the way that God intended instead of seeking out that quick fix. Testing. I mentioned earlier I was going to talk about testing. So this is going to be pretty brief because it doesn't need to be a really lengthy discussion. If you're not testing, you're guessing. I'm such a huge fan of that saying. And certainly there are times where you can guess. And there's times where I can guess and I just make an educated guess. But ultimately, it does come down to if you're not testing, you're guessing because you don't know what your levels are at. And that definitely holds true with testosterone. There is a test called testosterone free. And it's really what that means is it's total testosterone, which is what everybody thinks of and what is often only tested. And then there's free testosterone. So the test itself is called testosterone free. It is a at-home blood spot test. So what that means is a little finger prick device, which I think most people have probably used, and then you drop some blood on a piece of paper that then gets shipped into the lab company, and they are able to test many things this way now, including your testosterone levels. So this test particularly measures everything that you want to test when it comes to testosterone. It measures the amount of free testosterone, the total testosterone, something called albumin, as well as SHBG, which is the sex hormone binding globulin. So it gives you a complete picture of what's going on as opposed to just looking at testosterone and total testosterone. So that can help you identify any issues that you're having with your hormone levels, and you can find that on our website, foundationalhealth365.com, under lab testing, along with any of the other lab tests that we have available. Now we're going to move on to probably, I would guess from many people, the number one topic for this podcast. And this is the one that I get the most questions on, and that is TRT, or testosterone replacement therapy. Countless friends and family members talk to me about this on a regular basis, as well as my patients in the office, and males and females, because the females are wondering, should their husband do TRT, or their husband is doing TRT, or their boyfriend, and they want to know if this is the right decision. Here we go. TRT is prescription synthetic testosterone injections or gels that mimic natural testosterone in the body. And anytime you're putting something synthetic in the body to mimic something natural, it will come with side effects and consequences. That's not a maybe. That is not up for debate. That is an absolute fact. It affects some people more than others. It affects some people in the short term, where others it's going to be more in the long term. But it isn't a question of whether or not it will affect your body in a negative way. It absolutely will. Now, there's pros and cons to everything, and that is where the debate comes in. And that is for you to decide, do the pros outweigh the cons, or the cons outweigh the pros? So my whole hope and point today is to discuss what often isn't discussed when you enter a TRT clinic. Because guess what they're focused on? They're focused on the cons because they're trying to sell you on their product. The common side effects that we know about are things like acne, which is coming from an increase in oily skin production. You have increased anger and violence. I've actually heard this from countless people. My brother went on TRT, or my husband went on TRT. In fact, I just recently heard a story of a guy that went on TRT and his wife made him move out until he chose to get off of it because he was punching holes in walls and doors and he didn't even know why. So this isn't a little thing. It is a really big deal. So there's that increase in anger and violence. You have worsened sleep, including increases in sleep apnea that is well documented, breast swelling and tenderness, shrinking of the testicles, a loss of libido, and believe it or not, sometimes that loss of libido is permanent. It literally never comes back, even when somebody comes off of TRT, because it has destroyed the natural process, which we'll get into a little bit. And then infertility. This one is almost never talked about, especially in these clinics, and it is a really, really, really big deal. So infertility, which is also sometimes irreversible, happens due to lowered sperm count. And the longer that you're on TRT, the lower the sperm count goes. And sometimes it reaches zero, literally zero detectable sperm count within 2 to 4 months of being on testosterone replacement therapy. And then some men are never able to regain their sperm count. And as a result, they become infertile permanently. So the scary thing here is that more and more men every single day, especially due to billboards everywhere you look and TV commercials and social media ads popping up, more and more men every single day are signing up for TRT. And we're not talking about men in their 50s, 60s, and 70s that want to stay young. We're talking about men in their 20s and 30s. And they're never told of these dangerous side effects from the TRT clinics. I shouldn't say never. Some of them maybe do a good job with this. They're often not told of these dangerous side effects from the clinics who put profit first before the health of their patients and clients. So often also, and this goes into the side effect list, you have TRT clinics that will test things like hemoglobin and hematocrit levels, but they won't tell you why. Well, here's why. In some cases, men will develop a condition called polycythemia. Polycythemia is where you have an increase in the overproduction of things like hematocrit and hemoglobin due to an increase in the overproduction of red blood cells. In fact, there is at times a 315% increase in the odds of getting polycythemia when you're on TRT. So not just once in a while, a 315% increase of developing polycythemia. And when you have polycythemia, this overproduction of red blood cells, your blood becomes thicker and more sticky. And when your blood becomes thicker and more sticky, guess what? You have an increase of things happening like high blood pressure, myocarditis. Doesn't sound like a good thing, and it's not, because myocarditis means heart inflammation. You have an increase in blood clots, you have an increase in strokes, and you have an increase in heart attacks. So kind of a big deal there. 1 in 4 men on TRT will also develop something called gynecomastia. That means enlarged fatty breasts. So think about this for a second. Men go on TRT to feel and look more manly. That is the reason that most of them do it anyway. And 25%, 1 in 4, 25% of those men that are going on TRT to look and feel more manly will develop man boobs, which isn't exactly manly. And I don't say that to be funny, even though it's a funny term. That's a really, really big deal. It's the polar opposite of why they are going on this therapy. So why does this happen when you're increasing testosterone? And the reason is because it's synthetic. When your body produces testosterone naturally in the testicles, it gets distributed properly throughout the body the way that God intended. When you inject it or smear it on in the form of a gel, synthetically, it does not get distributed properly. And that is why areas like the testicles will shrink and the breasts will grow because of this improper distribution in the testosterone. And the really big problem with TRT is when you are getting it synthetically, your body tells your brain it doesn't need to produce it in the testicles. And as a result, your brain quits producing other hormones like FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, or LH, luteinizing hormone, which is why sperm production goes down. But the bigger issue is your brain is ultimately telling your testicles they do not need to produce testosterone. And often this is not reversible, and you're stuck needing TRT for life. So try going into one of the very likely countless TRT clinics in your area because they are popping up everywhere. It's the new trend in healthcare. It's a horrible trend, in my opinion. So try going into one of those clinics armed with this knowledge and see how many of these things that I just told you about that they will tell you about, as opposed to just telling you all of the benefits that they see when men go on TRT. So I realize No matter what I say, some men are still going to opt for TRT instead of lifestyle. So, for those of you that are not willing or unable to address low T levels with lifestyle change, here are a couple of recommendations for you. Number one, seek out a TRT clinic that does proper testing, like I mentioned earlier. So you're getting to the root cause, and you also find out that one of those clinics, not only did, if they get to the root cause, chances are they care, they're probably informing you more. And then ideally, they're going to be doing something called microdosing instead of macrodosing the TRT. Anytime you can microdose something, it's going to be better. I talked about this with my Ozempic GLP-1 podcast as well. Certainly not a fan of Ozempic. I understand why people do it, so not being critical of them. But if you're choosing to do that, if you're choosing to do TRT, this is where microdosing comes in. And you can often, for instance, with Ozempic, you can take 1/10 of the dose. Well, actually, not specifically Ozempic, but some of the other GLP-1s. You can take 1/10 of the actual dose and see similar, if not the same results. And you're going to dramatically reduce the side effects when you're doing that, of course. Number two, ideally, if you're seeking something outside of raising T levels with lifestyle, instead of TRT, seek out something called peptide therapy. So admittedly, this is not an area of expertise for me, but I do plan to do an entire podcast on peptide therapy because this is something I'm getting more and more questions about. And there's countless supplement companies that are jumping on this bandwagon, and you see collagens with peptides, and most people don't even know what that means because it is confusing. So it is something that I plan to do a lot more research on, to do a podcast on in the future. So definitely stay tuned for that. But peptide therapy has been shown to have some promise with anti-aging, which is the opposite of what TRT has been shown to do. And the two peptides that show the most promise for somebody that's seeking this out are called BPC 157 and TB, like Tom Brady, but doesn't stand for Tom Brady, 500. So peptides, really what they are, they're just a shorter chain of amino acids, and they can be found in foods also, like organ meats. So this is where peptides come from naturally. Organ meats, glandulars, so things like eating a thyroid from an animal or a supplement made from thyroid from an animal, as well as things like colostrum, which is known as that first milk of a cow or a goat or other animals for that matter. Those are the areas where peptides are found naturally, and they have been shown to help with things like muscle growth and strength, skin health, improved elasticity of skin, which means reduced wrinkles, better sleep, increased libido, and many, many more health benefits. So keep in mind, there is a limited amount of research on these, and not on the organ meats as well as the supplements. Those are well researched, well documented, tremendous benefits to those. I'm a huge fan. But there is limited research on peptide injections, and it's a fairly new field. So I would highly recommend doing your own research, proceeding with caution, and again, stay tuned for that upcoming podcast. I personally would recommend doing the eating of organ meats and supplements. If this is something that you want to go down, you're trying to raise testosterone naturally, this is also a really great way to do it, in addition to all of the other supplements and food recommendations that I made earlier. So much better when you're getting it from whole food and supplements instead of injections. So I strongly feel that peptide injections are still remarkably better than TRT, just not as good as doing it the natural way. So in closing, in my opinion, as I mentioned, I have discussion with friends and family members, patients on a regular basis who are opting for TRT and often say to me, I've tried everything and my levels just won't raise. I had no choice, or what am I supposed to do? If you've listened to me in the past, you know that I don't come from a place of judgment, and I will never tell someone what decision to make. But here's what I will encourage men who are considering TRT to do. Be honest with yourself. Just because you're working out and drinking whey protein shakes doesn't mean you've tried everything. If you are serious about raising your T levels without TRT and want to avoid the potential long-term side effects of TRT, then take some action. Actually incorporate what we talked about today. Stick with it. Don't try it for a week and say it didn't work for me. If you honestly feel you've given it all and incorporated everything I've talked about for a 6-month period of time or longer and your levels still aren't raising, then I would recommend at that point incorporating organ meats and organ supplements and glandular supplements. And if that doesn't work, then going to peptide injection therapy. And if I can't convince you to not do TRT, then please at least seek out a clinic that does the micro dosing. The inspirational and educational takeaways from today. Number 1, success equals simple habits performed consistently over time. Raising testosterone naturally certainly is not a quick fix like TRT is, but I promise you, if you incorporate what we discussed today, along with downloading our free Raise Your Testosterone Naturally 60-day protocol, you will not only see your T levels rise, but you will dramatically improve the health of your entire brain and body in the process, which is going to lead to a better quality of life guaranteed. Number 2, knowledge without action is powerless. So, as a result, your 3 actionable takeaways from this podcast. The best nutrients that boost testosterone include healthy fats, fibers, proteins, magnesium, zinc, probiotics. And then if you want to have a little boost from there, that's where you move into things like organ meat supplements or just organ meats as well as glandulars. Paleo Valley is an excellent company out there that has some great products when it comes to organ supplements. Number 2 actionable takeaway, avoid entirely or at least limit testosterone killing refined sugars, refined grains, and alcohol, which lead to inflammation and destroy T levels. The third one is incorporate intermittent fasting, weight training, high intensity interval training, and then getting great quality sleep and lowering your body fat. Number 3, you're a leader, lead by example. If you enjoyed today's podcast and found it beneficial, I want you to think about the men in your life who need to hear this message. Be a leader for them before they run off to a TRT clinic for a quick fix that will likely lead to long-term consequences that they will eventually regret. Drop them a text and tell them to check out the Foundational Health Podcast with Dr. Kevin Schultz on raising testosterone naturally. Until next time, make health your hobby. Thank you for listening to the Foundational Health Podcast. As always, if you would like to learn more about making health your hobby, visit our website at foundationalhealth365.com and follow me on Facebook at Kevin Schultz DC Foundational Health.